BBC News here on BBC One now with Michelle Hussein. It's 10 o'clock.
International condemnation as North Korea launches a rocket into space. Protesters in South Korea say it's a front for a weapons test. America says the UN is being defied.
North Korea broke the rules. Rules must be binding. Violations must be punished.
In other news, here, a brutal attack on 2 children leaves 1 critically injured. 2 boys, aged 10 and 11, are questioned by police. Another government minister immersed in an expenses row, but Jeff Hoon says his house is in order. And spinning in the rain, but Jenson Button stays on track with a second Grand Prix win in Malaysia. Good evening. North Korea's decision to defy international opinion and launch a long-range rocket has prompted condemnation and alarm. Critics claim it was really testing ballistic technology which could be used in a missile. President Obama called the launch provocative. The UN Security Council is meeting now in emergency session. We'll be hearing from New York in a moment, but first, John Sudworth reports from Seoul in South Korea.
A few hours after it fired its rocket, there was this defiant announcement from North Korean state television, claiming the satellite launch had been a success. But it has released no pictures. This footage is from its last but failed attempt to place an object into orbit more than 10 years ago. The reclusive state will have been desperate to succeed this time round, but the US military, which was closely tracking the launch, claims it was yet another failure, with the satellite splashing down in the Pacific Ocean. Still, the US President Barack Obama, speaking in Prague, was leading the condemnation.
North Korea broke the rules. Rules must be binding. Violations must be punished. Words must mean something.
Here in South Korea, the government has called the launch reckless and says it threatens the stability of the whole region. But North Korea says it is simply part of its peaceful pursuit of a space program, as is its right under international law.
North Korea's opponents claimed the launch directly over Japanese territory was a breach of UN resolutions, because even if the satellite had succeeded, the real aim was a test of missile technology that could reach the United States. Japan deployed anti-missile batteries and its allies sent warships close to North Korean waters. But in the end, there was no attempt to shoot the rocket down. There will instead be a diplomatic response.
It's a breach of international obligations. It will be condemned in every country of the world, and they should desist from testing and proliferating nuclear weapons.
The apparent failure of its satellite will be an embarrassment, but North Korea is unlikely ever to admit it. John Sudworth, BBC News, Seoul.
So news of the North Korean rocket launch emerged as President Obama continued his international tour. This evening he touched down in the Turkish capital, Ankara. Earlier today he was in Prague, where he pledged to lead the world into a nuclear-free future. Our North America editor Justin Webb is travelling with the president.
Once again, an opportunity for Barack Obama to make his case to individual Europeans. Once again, the welcome for both the Obamas was warm, the mood receptive. The case this time was that nuclear weapons, all of them, should be eliminated. 9 nations have or are thought to have nuclear bombs. Mr. Obama said America could not alone abolish them, but it could lead the way.
I state clearly and with conviction America's commitment to seek the peace and security of a world without nuclear weapons. I'm not naive. This goal will not be reached quickly, perhaps not in my lifetime. It will take patience and persistence. But now we too must ignore the voices who tell us that the world cannot change.
There were tough messages in this speech, including a renewed commitment to the building in Eastern Europe of a missile defense shield, something the Russians want to stop. But the commitment was linked to an implicit promise. If the Russians helped end Iran's nuclear program, the commitment could change.
If the Iranian threat is eliminated, we will have a stronger basis for security and the driving force for missile defense construction in Europe will be removed.
At the end of the speech, the crowd surged, as European crowds always do now, to meet the man, to touch him. He wasn't in Prague for long, but the president hopes once again that he has sowed the seeds of change.
One phrase summed up today's speech: yes, we can. It worked well for him in the presidential election. He is trying it now on the world stage as well.
This evening, the president left for Turkey, where for the first time he'll make his case in a majority Muslim country. Air Force One is on an outreach trip with a long-term goal to gather world support for Mr. Obama's ambitious program. Justin Webb, BBC News, Prague.
Well, as you heard earlier, the United Nations Security Council called an emergency session this evening to discuss the North Korean rocket launch. Let's go live now to Laura Trevelyan, who's there. Laura, what are the options open to the Security Council?
Well, the Council's been meeting for almost 2 hours now. I'm told it's very hot, very crowded, very tense there. One of the options clearly is for more sanctions against North Korea, if indeed it is in breach of a UN Security Council resolution banning it from carrying out any ballistic or any nuclear tests of any devices. The position of the Western powers and Japan is that North Korea is in breach. The key question tonight is, what do China and Russia think? Remember, China, a long-time ally of North Korea. Both countries have the power to block UN Security Council resolutions. Now, I'm told by diplomats, because of these divisions among the key powers, all we're going to get tonight is a rather general press statement saying that North Korea should behave policefully, rather sort of generalised expressions of concern. But I'm told that the countries have agreed that they're going to begin negotiations on a substantive response to what North Korea has done, i.e. they're going to begin agreement on a resolution. Those negotiations will start later this week.
You said more sanctions earlier, which reminds us that this isn't the first time that the international community and the Security Council have been in this position with North Korea.
Yes, a tough sanctions resolution was passed against North Korea in October of 2006 when it launched a nuclear device. Those sanctions include an arms embargo against North Korea, financial sanctions against key North Koreans, and really the key now is what the West are pushing for is another resolution calling for tighter enforcement of those existing sanctions.
Laura, thank you. That's Laura Trevelyan, our UN correspondent. Here, 2 children are in hospital tonight, one with serious head injuries following a vicious assault. It happened in Edlington in South Yorkshire. Tonight, police are questioning 2 boys aged 10 and 11 about the incident. Danny Savage reports.
Police today guarding the scene of a violent assault, which has left 2 children in hospital, one of them fighting for his life.
The first thing known about the boy's injuries was when the 9-year-old was found walking up this street by people living here, covered in blood. Police say he had injuries to his head and his arm, and he's said to have told the people that found him that he was also hit with bricks and burnt with cigarettes.
I had to go away from my own children just to be sick and cry. It was just horrific.
One of Lisa Meehan's children found the 9-year-old. She says she couldn't believe the extent of his injuries when she saw the boy.
He told my daughter that they had a knife and that they'd cut him all over. There was blood dripping from his arms and his head. He'd got no shoes on his feet. His feet were absolutely black.
The boy then told them he couldn't find his 11-year-old friend, who was eventually located in an old railway cutting nearby. Police say he was semi-conscious and had a life-threatening head injury.
My youngest son found him.
And what did he say about when he found him? How was he?
He said he were in a bad way. He said he were cold and he said he were covered in blood.
He's now in Sheffield Children's Hospital in a critical but stable condition. 2 boys aged 10 and 11 were traced to a nearby allotment where they were detained by police. They are now being questioned by detectives. Danny Savage, BBC News, Edlington near Doncaster.
Police have now recovered all the bodies from the wreckage of the helicopter which crashed into the North Sea last week. The black box from the Bond Super Puma has also been found today by specialist divers. All 14 passengers and 2 crew members were killed when the aircraft came down as it was returning from an oil platform. The Transport Secretary Geoff Hoon has become the latest minister to hit the headlines over his use of expenses. It's been revealed that when he was Defence Secretary, he claimed tens of thousands of pounds on his constituency house while letting out his London flat and living rent-free in a Whitehall apartment. He says he hasn't broken any rules, as Ian Watson reports.
Pilloried in the papers, but Geoff Hoon says he's done nothing wrong. So this isn't a story about MPs breaking the rules, but about whether those rules are right.
It is dreadful. I mean, it's made people more sceptical about politicians than I ever recall. People should be sceptical about their politicians, don't regard them as heroes. But now we have an exaggerated public view that they're all thieves, they're all rogues, they're all lining their own pockets.
So what did Geoff Hoon actually do? Well, during the Iraq War and for 3 years afterwards, he was living here in Admiralty House, free of charge, paid for by the government. So he rented out his London flat in this street. And he claimed expenses on his second constituency home in Derby.
In my view, to accept two houses at the taxpayer's expense at the same time and then derive money from letting out one of them is unethical. And Mr Hoon seriously ought to question whether or not the money he's gained in that way should be returned to the taxpayer.
But Geoff Hoon told the Mail on Sunday, "I only claimed whatever the rules allowed for. It doesn't necessarily mean I was making a profit. That's not a fair interpretation, and I do not accept that." And he says he wasn't the only minister to live in a government flat while claiming expenses on a constituency home. The Prime Minister lives in accommodation funded by the taxpayer here in Downing Street, and he also claims for a constituency home in Scotland. That's within the rules, and many of his predecessors have done much the same thing. But David Cameron says if he steps across the threshold here in Downing Street, the system would change. But he could be overtaken by events. An independent review of MPs' expenses has been speeded up, and we could see some radical reforms.
I think we do need to get an outside examination of this, and so there are recommendations coming from people who've got no axe to grind. I think that's what the public want, and they want it quickly.
And today, more details of the Home Secretary Jackie Smith's expenses were revealed. But I'm told she intends to challenge allegations that she made a claim for a barbecue costing £39. In a few months' time, more light will be shone on MPs' expenses when just about every receipt they've submitted recently will be published. That should stop the leaks, but may still reflect badly on Westminster's reputation. Ian Watson, BBC News.
More than 20 people have been killed in a suicide bomb attack at a crowded Shia mosque in Pakistan. Dozens more were wounded in the blast in the Punjab province, south of the capital, Islamabad. Witnesses say the attacker was a teenage boy who blew himself up at the entrance to the mosque. The government has denied claims that the radical Muslim preacher Abu Qatada has been able to release extremist propaganda from inside his top security prison cell. It's alleged that letters and messages from the jailed cleric have made it onto the internet as recently as last month. Here's Andy Ty.
This is Abu Qatada out on bail last year. Once described by a judge as Osama bin Laden's spiritual ambassador to Europe, the radical Islamist cleric is now back in jail, fighting deportation to Jordan, where he's been convicted in his absence of involvement in terrorism. But today, the counter-extremism think tank the Quilliam Foundation claims he's still issuing propaganda from his cell, preaching jihad, suggesting the UK opposes Islam and denouncing Muslim soldiers or police officers in non-Muslim countries.
The bottom line is this has got to stop, because there's no point investing millions of taxpayers' money in trying to counter the message that he's putting out there on behalf of Al-Qaeda and other people. He knows the psychological warfare that he's conducting. My fear is that our authorities not only are not aware, but aren't ahead of the game as we should be.
Qatada, a Palestinian-Jordanian asylum seeker, first came to Britain 16 years ago on a forged passport. Although the government allowed him to make an appeal on behalf of the British hostage Norman Kember, it now says it's doing all it can to stop him issuing statements that turn up on foreign websites.
If he makes a phone call, it is monitored. If it's not in English, it is translated. He's not allowed access onto the internet. He can't go onto the internet and websites and contribute anything.
The prison service say tough security measures are in place. Abu Qatada has no access to the internet, but they say they can't stop other people putting material on the web on his behalf or in his name. Andy Ty, BBC News at the Ministry of Justice.
Now news of Jenson Button's day and the rest of the sport. Here's Amanda Davis.
Thanks, Michelle. Yes, Jenson Button's dream start to the Formula One season continues. He beat both the weather and the competition to emerge victorious from a thunderstorm-hit Malaysian Grand Prix, as Andy Swiss reports.
2 wins out of 2 for Jenson Button, but after his stroll in Melbourne, this one was more of a paddle. From pole position, Button had made a dreadful start, overtaken by Nico Rosberg at the first corner and dropping back to 4th. He battled back to the front, and then it began to rain. Indeed, barely had Button retaken the lead from Timo Glock than the heavens opened in quite breathtaking style, with visibility non-existent and the racetrack more like a swimming pool. For a few brief moments, it was pantomime season again, cars spinning in every direction, including Lewis Hamilton's. He eventually finished 7th. With more than 20 laps still to go, the race was stopped, conditions now utterly impossible. And for nearly an hour, the drivers waited soggily for a restart, while the fans created their own sporting entertainment. Eventually, though, the weather won, and so had Button. 2 victories in 2 highly eventful races.
One day, hopefully, we'll have a race that has no safety cars, no accidents, and no rain that stops play. So it's been a couple of difficult races. People might say that our car's the best and it's easy from there, but it's not. It's definitely not. So I'm very happy.
Button will only get half points for this truncated race, 5 instead of the normal 10. But at the moment, it seems nothing can dampen his spirits. Andy Swiss, BBC News.
Match of the Day 2 follows the news over on BBC 2, so if you don't want to know today's Premier League results just yet, now is the time to cover your eyes and ears. 17-year-old debutant Federico Macheda scored the injury time winner as Manchester United went back to the top of the table with a 3-2 win over Aston Villa. And Everton moved one step closer to Europe as on-loan Brazilian striker Joe scored twice in a 4-0 thrashing of Wigan. Rangers closed in on Celtic at the top of the Scottish Premier League this afternoon. Chris Boyd scored his 25th goal of the season and the only goal of the game to beat Falkirk 1-0. Rangers are now 3 points behind their old firm rivals. And fans of the Football League's bottom club, Luton Town, are celebrating victory in the Johnston's Paint Trophy. Claude Napper scored the winner in extra time against Scunthorpe to make it 3-2 at Wembley. So finally something to cheer for Luton fans facing relegation after being deducted 30 points for financial irregularities. And Andy Murray's won his 3rd tournament of the year, beating Novak Djokovic to claim the Masters 1000 title in Miami. The Scot played some of his best tennis of the year to beat Djokovic in straight sets and take another step towards overtaking the Serbian player as the world's number 3. And that's all your sport, Michelle.
Amanda, thanks very much. And in fact, that's it from us. There's more on today's stories over on the BBC News channel, but from Amanda and from me, a very good night.
Good evening. Well, I hope you made the most of the weekend sunshine, because next week, I'm afraid, it's all about the rain. Now, before the rain arrives overnight, we've got quite a bit of cloud moving in across these northern and western parts of the UK, well in advance of that rainfall. But the cloud helps to stop those temperatures falling away too far, 5, 6 or 7 degrees further north and east, closer to 2 or 3. But tomorrow, well, it's all about that rain, which will be working its way steadily from west to east. That rain will be getting into Northern Ireland quite quickly through the morning, and then it will spread its way across most of Wales and the southwest of England, with a few showers breaking out ahead of that. Should be a bright start in the southeast of England. In fact, we hang on to some bright weather here into the afternoon, and with some sunshine and a southerly breeze, temperatures in the centre of London getting up to 16 or 17 degrees. Outside of London, closer to 13 or 14, but some good sunny spells here and there. After a bright start in Lincolnshire, Yorkshire and Northumberland, it clouds over for the afternoon with a chance of 1 or 2 showers, 12 degrees in Newcastle. Hanging on to some brighter weather in the north and east of Scotland, it's breezy and temperatures down on recent days, 10 degrees in Aberdeen. Cloud will be working its way into western Scotland with a few spots of rain in the southwest, but really quite wet and quite windy for Northern Ireland. Pretty miserable too across Wales for the afternoon. The rain's not too heavy, but it is quite widespread and you'll feel cool underneath that. And a similar story in the southwest of the UK. That rain pushes its way eastwards through the overnight period. Tuesday, it's a blustery day with sunshine and showers.
It's all coming together next on BBC One in Damages.
The 80s are back, and it's criminal. Ashes to Ashes returns.
Dustin Hoffman and Meryl Streep in the Oscar-winning Kramer vs. Kramer in 40 minutes on BBC One. First with BBC HD now. More questions for Glenn Close.
Previously on